Welcome back. Today we're going to go with my 390U. This is the miniature version of the White Girl. This one took a while to get to. You know, I finalized the design and everything on the White Girl, and it winds up being about a six and a half inch pattern when it's all said and done. And sometimes it's just a little too much. You may move some fish on that, but you're probably not going to get the commitment from them all the time. So I scaled down the White Girl to the 390U, and this one comes in at about 4.5, depending on the length of the tail and hooks that you use and everything. But we're going to run through this one. To start, this is an Daiichi 1850. This is a size 8. It's a vertical ring eye for the back hook, which now a lot of folks are starting to use almost exclusively for articulated patterns, but I kick this one off to a 90-degree on the back hook. I offset the back hook 90 degrees, so that's why I originally started using this. It was a little bit easier for me to offset it, but could probably just go with the regular horizontal ring eye if you want and be just fine with this. To start, I'm going to take this is just, these are more along the lines of saddle right here. This is a whiting American saddle or an American Hackle. This is a whole saddle, and if you look up at the front on this, we'll go with this view right here. If you look up at the top, this is more along the lines of a schlappen. It's a little bit webbier of a fiber. Everything is a lot thicker as well, and then you got broader. As you move up to here, you have more so of your saddles, and they're a little bit thinner, a little bit more sparse, but they make great tail sections or deceiver tails for these smaller patterns. For the full-size White Girl, I go with the top or the more schlappen type feather. For the 390U, I'll go with the saddle. So as always, I'm just going to take and turn these two the opposite direction. That way we have a little bit of a V sitting right there. And then I'm going to measure this out. On the White Girl, my measurement is the knob on my material clip. I'm going to move this just a little bit back, and I'm going a ½ inch past the bend on the Renzetti here, usually about right where my rubber band rests. That's about the reference that I use for this. And then I'm going to take this, just peel some fibers back, and then I'm going to clip it to where I have just those little stubs right there. It's going to give me a little bit more to grab onto once I tie this in. So those two for the deceiver style are just heading straight back, opposite of one another. You got that V section right there that we were looking at before. You got that V section in there, and all that does really is it just creates a little bit more motion when it's in the water. So when you're pulling on this, these tails are going to come together, and as you release the tension, they're going to open up a little bit, and then they continually have like this fanning motion to them. So it just makes a little bit more motion, along with it doing a horizontal rotation in the water. You get this, it just causes a lot of commotion in the water, and the eats on these things are pretty dang explosive. Moving on from the tail, we're going to put some flash in here, and I'm just going to grab, I don't know, half a dozen to 10 fibers, and this is just black Flashabou that I'm going to run down each side just short of the length of the tail, just to give it a little bit of extra flash. Just going to work that forward, and then I'm going to bring these on the opposite side, run them down the other tail. Everything's good right there, and then just trim that short of the tail. We got everything sitting how we want it right now. We're going to move to some craft fur for our coverage on the back. And what I want to do with this is I'm just going to grab a small section get that how I want it. I'm going to grab this small section and clean this up in the excuse me, clean this up in the comb. Then I just want to even up the tips. So I'm going to grab this at the front. I'm going to get some, even this up just a little bit, and you can see those tips are a lot more even than when you first cut it off the patch. And then I'm just going to trim that section. Now, because this is going to be canted this direction, that back hook is going to be sitting that way. I want my light color on the bottom section sitting right here. So we're going to reverse tie this, and I'm going to go on my side for the white, and then the camera side for the gray. Just get that set in there, and then I'm going to trim that like so. Now we're going to grab some gray craft fur, and that'll complete this back cover onto the deceiver tail. I go a little bit sparse on this back section. When I do the cover for the front hook, it's a little thicker, so I'll grab a little bit more material for that. But like I said, this section I like it to be a little bit more sparse than the back, or than the front. Get those materials somewhat evened out there. Pretty clean to this point. Now I'm just going to measure that out, get the same length that I have with the white, and then a couple of clean wraps. Nice and loose, nothing too heavy. Once you get some pretty good security right there, you can go ahead and really wrench down on that. And then before I take and reverse tie that section, I just like to come right in the front here and get a couple of good solid wraps in front of everything. That way it's not gonna spin on me. If you try and go directly over that craft fur without anchoring that in place first, your craft fur, because you're reverse tying it and it's a non-compressible fiber, what it's going to have a tendency to do is rotate on you, and that's going to wind up messing the fly up. So get a couple of clean wraps in the front there, and that will eliminate that thing from spinning on you. So now that we have that in place, we're going to go to our body material, which is just a straight polar chenille, black, no UV in this one. Just a straight polar chenille. And I want to find the section that I want to work with here. There we go. We'll get this tied in right in front of where we reverse tied everything. It'll ease that little bump that you have right there, and we're going to work that all the way to the front, leaving just about 1/8 of an inch to tie in our over and underwing. We'll get this spinning around here, get one complete wrap, 1.5, and then just anchor that in place, and then we're going to work our way to the front. This is a little bit more sparse than the UV because you just have the single black strands. You don't have the clear and the UV along with the black and everything. So it'll take a few more wraps to really fill out that body how you want it, as opposed to using the UV because there's just so many more strands per inch. But just take your time working that through there and you'll get the body that you want for that. Now, just clear that out of the way. And we'll give a cut right there, get that out of our way. And then I'm just going to clean this up with a few wraps, like so. Now I still have that 1/8 of an inch, give or take, to tie in my over and underwing. And for that, I'm going to use some Woolly Bugger Marabou in white, and for the gray, it's just I'm going to have to sort through and find some good clean blood quill that'll work for this application, because I can't find Woolly Bugger Marabou readily available in gray. So, or if I do find it, the dyeing is off from the blood quill that I have, and it just aggravates me, so I can't use that. So what I'm going to do is just lay this back. I just peeled this section off of the side of a good plume of Woolly Bugger Marabou. You can see how it's all good and bulky, and there's a lot of material to it. If you use the blood quill, it tends to be a little bit sparse and it kind of disappears on you a little bit. I like it to have that full look on the fly. So I tend to go with the Woolly Bugger. Just clean that up with a few wraps, and then we're going to go into, this is a pretty good piece right here. I'll probably be able to use this for front and back. See how it's nice and just webby on the sides right there? You get a lot of material, a lot of bulk through this, and there's some longer fibers as well, so you really don't have to skimp too much. Or if you're tying a full size, white girl, you're still going to have plenty enough feathers to reach the whole way back and still have the bulk that you want for this. So now I'm just going to measure this out against the white, get the same length, and then get a wrap around. Just clean that up with a couple of good thread wraps, and then our back hook is essentially done. Just clean up some of that marabou right there. We'll get a whip finish. And that's complete. So our back hook's done. Let's see here. Shorten that thread up a little bit, and then I'm just going to touch this up on the top with some gray. Grab our articulation wire and just one bead for this one. There we go. Just the one red bead. We're going to throw that over our wire and set that off to the side. Some fibers sitting all through here. They're making a mess. There we go. Try and clean that up a little bit. Now we're going to go to our front hook. This is a Gami B10S size 2. Get that out of there. And the same as the white girl, we're just going to take this, set that right in the vise before I articulate this. I'm going to going to grab a Leatherman and I'm going to heat this up and throw a bend into the hook here. So I'm going to heat that up at about the 1/3 point. Get that off to the side, and I'm going to take this and bend it toward the camera, over like that, at about a 30-degree bend, and then I'm going to take about 5 degrees down, just right like so. Now you can see the bend that we're working with on this hook. I'll give it a good spin right there, that way you're able to see everything, just what we're looking at for that bend. Now, after that cools down a touch, that's pretty good. We're going to articulate this, so I'm going to start my thread right behind that bend, and I'm going to work it back to the point of the hook. Grab my back hook. Now this is what I was talking about, this being 90 degrees offset. That vertical eye is now going to be placed horizontally. So it's going to sit like this, and once I tie this in, that 90 degree, my hook is actually going to be facing perpendicular to this back one. It's going to be at a 90 degree, and the reason that I do that is because this fly rotates, like I said before, on a horizontal axis. At that point, I always have one hook facing down. If I had it to where, the majority of the time they're going to eat the front hook. But because this thing is so erratic, and sometimes they just, like I said, the eats are really aggressive. Sometimes they will wind up tagging that back hook, but I always wanted to have one hook facing down, and because this thing rotates so much, I found it necessary to kick that one off to the side. So I'm just going to find the distance that I want, bring that around, make sure that my wire is going right down the side, and then I have a little bit more of a gap than the width of my bead for the connection. And I'm going to bring this into my material clip. Just watch when you're peeling fibers back on this one. Just remember that that hook is 90 degrees offset. It can bite you. Had it happen quite a few times on this pattern. So again, we're just doubling our articulation wire back, and then I'm going to pull these to about the halfway point, and then tie them into place. I got everything sitting how I want it now, and I'm going back to my craft fur. Now, the way that we tied everything in before, now we have the proper orientation with the white on the bottom and the gray on the top. If you would have tied it with the vertical eye going this way, and then the gray and then the white, your orientation would have been 90 degrees off. So just remember to kick everything 90 degrees and you'll be good when you put these two together. Back to the craft fur on this, we're going to take a little bit extra. For our skirt than we took for the back. Once again, just clean that out in the comb, and then I'm going to grab close to the tips on this. I'm going to pull everything loose and then just even this up. We've got pretty nice even section right there. If you want to get rid of some of those shorter fibers, go about halfway down the length of your craft fur and then just peel that stuff out. It'll get rid of some of the unnecessary bulk. So now I just want to measure this out. I want it going about halfway back into my overwing. And then same thing, we're going to reverse tie it. Get everything set how you want it right there. 1, 2. Couple of loose wraps followed up by some more secure ones. And then just trim that right there. I'm going to work my thread back. I'm going to try and catch some bare hook. That way, once again, I don't have that worry of things rotating on me. And do the same thing with the gray. Grab a little bit more than what you did on the back hook. Even everything out here, clean it up in the comb. Cleaned up pretty nice. Grab up close to the tips. Get everything pretty well even. Then I'm going to cut this section. And then once again, I'll just get rid of some of those shorter fibers. Grabbing it about the halfway point. And then running my hand through that. Get my length to how I want it. 1, 2. And then I'm going to tighten down on a few wraps. And then reverse tie. Same as before. There's a few short fibers in there that I don't like. Catch some bare hook before you go into the reverse tie, or the reverse tying of your craft fur. So get a couple of good wraps right there, and then we'll just take that. If you want to, you can throw a little bit of glue on there. I don't really see it necessary. If you do everything right and you get a couple of good wraps in front of the craft fur just on the hook, you're not really going to rotate too much or at all if you get a couple of good wraps on that. So I don't really worry about the glue. Seems to have a tendency to want to weaken your material up anyhow, especially if you use that zap and it heats up a lot. So once again, we're going back to the polar chenille, tying it in front of our craft fur. That way it's easing that slope just a little bit. And we're going right to the bend of the hook. Well, just short of the bend of the hook. Get that back in the cradle after a half hitch. 1.5 to 2 wraps. Make sure everything's good and secure. Make sure you hold your craft fur as well when you make that first anchor, and then just work your way to the front. 3 to 4 wraps, anchor, pull up any material that's in your way or that's trapped. Same thing right there. And I'm going to try and get one more wrap. That looks pretty clean right there. I got one more wrap in there, everything's good. There we go. Right before we're starting to work on the slope of this bend that we put in the hook, I want to tie in my overwings and my collar. So you can see that we're just right before that slope right there. So we have everything sitting how we want it, our material, our thread sitting where we need it to be. We're going to go back to our Marabou here, and I don't really like that one too much. I'm going to find another piece. Back to our Marabou, That one looks better. A little bit longer fibers, a little bit easier to work with. So we'll take this, once again, get a pretty generous section, just peel that right off, and then all I'm going to do is even everything up. There was a couple of fibers that were a little shorter, so I'm just going to pinch that and then pick that section off, and I have a nice even little plume right there to tie in for my overwings. Once again, measure this out. I want it going into the craft fur, so you can see the bead through there. I want it stopping right about where the bead is. So I'm going to flip that around. 1, 2. Get a couple of good loose wraps and then get an anchor wrap or two in there. There we go. Trim that off. I'm going to clean this up a little bit. And then we're going to go back to the gray. Those are all nice and even, so I really don't have to clean anything up there. I don't have to pinch any of those fibers because, like I said, they are even. And I'm going to set that on the top. 1, 2, get an anchor wrap in there. And then I'm going to trim this off before I start going too far down that slope. Now this is where things get a little bit tricky. It'll take you a little time to get used to tying this deer hair head in, but once you get it down, it's not as difficult as what it looks. Or that the two curves on this, the two bends, it does make it a little bit more challenging than tying just a straight deer hair head. But like I said, a little bit of practice with these and it winds up being pretty simple, honestly. You just have to remember your orientation, where you're at as far as if you have your vise turned or anything like that, and it winds up being pretty easy for you. So I'm going to try my best to stay out of the camera as always, but this one's a little bit more difficult to do so because I need to turn with the bend of the hook. I don't like how that went right there. There we go. So I switched over to some gel spun 200, and right where that bend starts, right where I left off with my Marabou, is where I'm going to tie in the collar, and it's before I go starting on the descent of this hook. I'm going to get my stacker out, and I'm going to go with some gray body, or gray deer belly hair. I'm going to try and find, you can see there's kind of like a little cowlick right there. Those may be a little more difficult for your collar section. So I'm going to go with these straight pieces, and I didn't even check and see if that made it in the, it probably didn't make it in the camera there. There's that little cowlick right there. These pieces are a little bit more straight and even. It'll be a little bit easier to work with this collar. So I'm going to take a pretty generous chunk here. I want a good thick collar on this. And then I'm going to take that, throw it in my stacker. Get everything somewhat even. That looks good. And I want to measure this out. I want my collar going back to about the point of my hook. Between the point and the barb of the hook is where I want my collar. So then I'm going to transfer hands and just cut that square. So now that I have that, I'm just going to grab this little section right in the front, making sure I get the entire bundle. 2 1/3, my thread's completely disappeared, and I just work my way through that little section. And you can see we've got a nice full collar. The underneath side is nice and clean. Got a little bit of interference, it looks like, with that white on the video, that is. It looks like it's a little blurry on the video, but that may be just because I don't have my eyes in. So I'm going to work my way back to right in front of that little caddis head shape section of deer hair right there. And this is where it'll get a little tricky, because you're working on that slope, you're working on the curve going away from you, and we're going to do a two-tone head. We're going to do gray over white, and I always do the lower section first, or the bottom section, I should say. So again, I'm going to get a generous clump here. I'll hold it up next to the hook for reference after I clean it out. This is a pretty thick section of deer hair for all the more room that we have to work with. There, I'll hold it up so you're able to see for reference what we're going to be using. And then I'm going to take the tips, I'm going to trim them from the back side, and then I'm going to tie this in at the center of that bundle. And I got deer hair everywhere. Alright, so I'm going to have this on the underneath side. It's just setting right on the bottom. I'm going to make one loose wrap, a second a little bit tighter, and then my third I'm going to pull down, and you'll see that flare. Once everything flares for me, I'm going to clean this up, and on that top section you can see right there, I have a clean platform to work with. I'm going to use the same thread path that I used for the white, but I'm going to take this, and it's going to be a nice even break between my gray and my white. Once again, I'm going to clean up this deer hair, and the dye didn't get the whole way down to the base on this section, so it's going to make a pretty neat little effect when we're trimming this out. Should look pretty neat. Again, I'm going to set that right on the top. Like I said before, I'm using the same thread path. 1, 2, and then my third, I'm going to let that thread go a little bit further in, and then I'm going to let go and just pull that down, and you can see it just flare everything up. Everything's nice and clean for us. There's not going to be a huge difference between this gray and the white, because like I said, the dye didn't get the whole way down to the base on this, but we're still going to have a neat look to that, because it's going to have like a multi-color to it. I'm going to try and get a better section here. There we go. Now, we've got our gray on top of the white. All I'm going to do now is take one section of gray, and I'm going to spin it completely right in the front. I'm not going to stack a gray and a white. Again, I'm just going to peel everything back. You can see, hopefully, how much hook I have to work with. I'm going to capture everything on the bottom with my thumb and my ring finger, and then on the top I have my pointer and my middle capturing everything and holding my deer hair in place. I'm going to get my 3 wraps, start to work that, and then release with my top 2, and then I'm just going to pull and get a good spin of deer hair. That's going to look really neat because it's going to have just the gray and the white, and it's going to look pretty nice when we trim this up. Not at all intended to be that way, but it's going to look pretty good, I think. I might start requesting the dye short of the base here from now on. Alright, peel everything back. Once again, we have a nice clean eye to whip finish. 1, 2. I'm going to get one more in there just for a little bit of extra security. Everything's looking good, everything's clean. Just run my fingers through this, make sure that I don't have any extra fuzz or anything. Doesn't really seem like I need to run the comb through it. Everything seems to be pretty well clean. Now comes another unique part of this, is how the head is trimmed. Let me see here. I'm gonna go with a fresh blade because I know those other ones are about wrecked. Tied quite a few with them, so we're going to take a fresh blade out. And work with this one. So, I'm going to get rid of some of that glue that's on there. Winds up sticking to my fingers a good bit. I don't know why they package them like that, but whatever. Alright, so the way I start with these is I start on the top section of the fly. So I work my way around here, I find my eye, and I get the shape that I want on my razor blade, and I just push this up to the tips of my collar. Not interfering with the collar at all, I just want the overall shape that I'm after here. I want a nice rounded head, and if I get too aggressive going back on this initially, I don't get that rounded head that I'm after. Good first couple of cuts right there. I'm going to work this down on the bottom section now, following about the same thread or about the same path, just going right through here, getting a nice rounded section, taking my time working through that, and you can see we have a nice rounded head on just 2 cuts. So now I'm going to turn this off to the side. I'm going to work on the bent section. I'm going to dig into the bend on this hook. So I'm just going to take one pass right back here. It's a nice flat cut. Same thing, just a flat cut down through here. I want to get a little bit more aggressive into the bend. And what this does is it creates a cup. Because you're cutting into the bend, it creates a cup that helps rotate your fly horizontally. There we go. You can see the bend that we have right there. This is just going to catch water and dig that fly down. So, to finish this thing up, I'm just going to take on the opposite side. I want to shake this just slightly. I don't work the entire way back because with the bend on that razor blade, it winds up cutting into my top and bottom section. So I just want that little bit rounded right there. And now I'm going to start feathering this down through to get rid of some of this excess white hair. I'm just completing the rounded portion, getting rid of some of this extra that I have bleeding back into my collar, and then at the same time continuing to round this section of hair off. I want to go back to my front here and just make this a little bit more rounded, a little bit more continuous. There we go. We're really starting to come into shape now. We're going to let that one go, and then I'm going to round off this bottom section just a little bit more. There we go. That's looking pretty good right there. I'm going to leave that one as it sits after one little trim right there. There's a couple of hairs I didn't like. I'm going to leave that as it sits. I like the way that that's looking. Okay, so now it's going to come down to putting on your eyes. I'm going to use 7mm fire eyes. These are fish skull eyes. For the full size for the white girl, I'll use 8.5mm. For this one, I like the 7s. They seem to be a pretty good fit. Proportionally, they're pretty good too. In order to do this, because if you're tying this on, if you're trying to glue on to a round portion of deer hair, you're not going to get a good stick. So what I do is I find my eye, I come straight back, and I just take a cut right here and just flatten this out. Just one cut right through there, flatten out that portion, and then you have a good base to lay your glue on. There we go. So now, man, I got deer hair everywhere. I'm gonna go with some Loctite gel, and I'm just gonna set this right on that flat section that I carved out, and then come around on the opposite side, right on that flat section. Take my eye, set it in place, grab some scissors and press it down. Same thing on the opposite side. Just set that right down into the base that you carved out, and then I'll just grab these on opposite sides. Just kind of hold some pressure on them until you feel it heat up a little bit, and then you're set. Your eyes are locked into place. I got one hair right there that's driving me nuts. Get rid of that. And then the last thing that I'll do is I'll grab a cautery tool and I'll just heat this up a little bit. I'll get rid of some of these hairs that are going to interfere with the eye. It smells wonderful too. Burning deer hair. I'll just clear out the eye. Everything's nice and clean for me. I used to coat the entire deer hair head with some UV resin. I don't really do that anymore. I'll go around the eyes a little bit. Sometimes I'll go on the inside just to give a little bit more of an aggressive dig. But I found that, one, it didn't really benefit a ton. And two, some of that resin, if it doesn't set exactly right, you wind up getting, just comes off in chunks and everything. And I don't know, I don't really see it as necessary, so I quit doing it. I'll put a little bit around the eyes, and like I said, sometimes on that front face I'll put some on, but that is about it. So now I'm going to pull all of the skirt and under and over wings out, so I have my coverage that I'm looking for. Try not to get bit by that back hook. It's trying like hell to get me. But, came out. Let me get one good look for the camera there. There is the completed 390U. There's that aggressive dig on that back end, or on that front hook, like I was saying. That thing just takes this fly, and it honestly, like, is, if you have good tension on your line, the second you give that thing a twitch, it just takes and rotates it and digs it down into the depths of the water with a horizontal rotation. And I'm telling you, the eats on this thing are just absolutely explosive. It's the first fly that I've ever designed to where I was able to get it to rotate on a horizontal plane. And like I said, the eats are pretty dang explosive, and it's a ton of fun to fish. But as always, guys, questions or comments, leave them with me. I'll get back to you. But thanks for watching, and we'll catch you on Wednesday.